Well, here we move on to discuss the different types and functions of the T cells. We actually have three major types of them. We have the helper T cells, we have the cytotoxic T cells, and we have the suppressor T cells. Okay, to begin with, the helper T cells, represented here by a hand sign, is because they offer a helping hand to the whole immune system. Okay, they have a regulatory role. They regulate all the arms of the immune system, and that is achieved through release of chemical mediators we call lymphokines. Okay, we have so many of them, but we will discuss each one of them in relation to their specific effect. And the first one here is stimulation of the cytotoxic and suppressor T cells. Here it is worth mentioning that these two cell types, the suppressor and cytotoxic T cells, can be stimulated directly by antigens, but the magnitude of stimulation in that case is low. Okay, but the helper T cells secrete lymphokines to cause their stimulation to a higher degree, and this is usually achieved through secretion of a lymphokine we call interleukin 2. Okay, secondly, they cause stimulation of growth and proliferation of the B cells, the B lymphocytes. Here again, this is worth mentioning that the B lymphocytes too can be stimulated directly by antigens, though to a lower degree. But once we have those lymphokines secreted by the helper T cells, their growth and differentiation can be stimulated to a higher degree. And in that case, the relevant lymphokines are interleukin 3, 4, 5 and 6. Okay, if you want to omit one, let it be interleukin 3, 4, 5. Interleukin 4, 5 and 6 are more important in this case. Okay, still later, the activation of macrophages. We discussed earlier that macrophages constitute the first line of defense and inflammatory response because they are already present in all the tissues of the body. And in terms of phagocytic activity, they are far superior to neutrophils. Okay, here in this case, the helper T cells have two types of effects. First one is whenever macrophages move to the injured tissue or tissue under microbial invasion, the helper T cells make their migration back to the bloodstream slow or even stop their migration. Anyway, this is kind of, you better stay there, you are well required there. Okay, and secondly, they increase their phagocytic potential even further, and the relevant lymphokine here in this case is usually interferon gamma. Okay, that too is secreted by the helper T cells. Still later, while the helper T cells regulate so many components of the immune system, they have positive feedback stimulatory effect on themselves. Okay, because if they have to drive this whole process, they need to be stimulated, and the helper T cells secrete lymphokines which increase their activity as well. Okay, then now we move on to the cytotoxic T cells. Now they're a bit different. Okay, the helper T cells achieve all their actions and functions through lymphokines. These are direct attack cells. Whenever a tissue is under microbial invasion, they bind to the invading microbe, they bind to it, and they secrete chemicals called perforins, which directly punch out holes in the surface membrane of the invading microbe. This is equivalent to direct killing. Okay, in addition, they secrete a variety of cytotoxic substances directly into the bound microbe. Okay, so this is how they go for direct attack and kill the invading microbes as well as the infected tissues. They ask you about the specific functions. So whenever we have viral infections and the viral particles get entrapped in tissue cells, the cytotoxic T cells will help to eliminate those tissue cells which are infected with viruses. Still later, in case of cancers, the cytotoxic T cells will play a predominant role in combating against the cancerous cells. Okay. Still later, in case of transplant patients, particularly heart transplant, the host tissue, the host elicits an immune response against the foreign body, that is the transplant. So specifically in case of heart transplant, if there is the reaction offered by the host, that is usually due to cytotoxic T cells. Okay. And still later we have the suppressor T cells. Probably they do nothing. They are just there to say enough. Okay. When it has been much of combat between the offending invading microbes and the host immune system, we have discussed it earlier that most of the time the inflammatory response offered by the host causes greater tissue damage than the invading microbes. Okay, so at some point there must be someone to say enough so as to protect the host against tissue damage, and this is done by the suppressor T cells. They just stop the immune response by suppressing the cytotoxic T cells and helper T cells so that there is no more tissue damage. And because they suppress other elements of the immune system, they too have a regulatory role. They ask you about T cells having a regulatory role, go for the helper T cells. If that you don't find it there in options, the suppressor T cells too have a regulatory role. Okay. Still later, at higher level, they identify cells through many techniques, and one of them is through surface markers. Different cell types have different surface markers. Okay, so even though there is significant overlap, the helper T cells have the surface markers CD4. So whenever they say that a specific T cell is CD4 positive, they mean helper T cells. Okay, similarly, the cytotoxic T cells have surface markers we call CD8. So whenever they tell you about CD8 positive cells, they mean cytotoxic T cells. Okay, but I must mention here that there is significant overlap. Okay, there are helper T cells 8 times with CD8 expression. Okay, so this is all about the helper T cells. If you have any relevant question, please put it in the comment section and we will try our level best to get back to you with a satisfying answer. Thank you very much.